solo track.
Shalom, shalom. We're back as promised. Last night we did the Sons of Ham. About a week ago, we did Noah and what time frame he would live. If you've been following this series thus far, then you should be familiar that I placed the event of Noah and the initial dispersal of Homo sapiens sapiens, or humans, between 200 and 100,000 years ago. That start point is pertinent because that's the only way you can make sense of Noah being the progenitor of every human being that's alive today. That puts him at the root of the family tree. That shows that there was a bottlenecking event, meaning every human at that time was reduced to a small number and then had to reboot through Noah and his three sons. And again, we're looking at this with a biblical lens, and we're overlapping the scientific information with the biblical information. All right? So, with no further ado, let's get into today's topic. Who are the sons of Japheth? And again, before we start, I have to make this plain. We are not using phenotype, physical appearance, or any superficial means to determine who would be the best proxy, the best representatives of the sons of Japheth. We're going to use the genetic data, and we're going to see what's the most parsimonious explanation for the children of Japheth and how to identify them today. Again, we're not using skin color here. We're not using modern race theory. We're going to use our knowledge of the DNA and genetics. Again, what is DNA? What does haplogroups do? Haplogroups show common ancestry. Everybody that belongs to a particular haplogroup share a common ancestor. And we're going to be dealing with Y DNA. So Y DNA haplogroups show a common male ancestor. That being said, let's get started. Dive right into it, y'all. So, I have a PowerPoint presentation readily and available for you guys. So let's go to view and then click reading view. Genetic Japhites elucidate the ancestry of the putative ancestor. So, the argument goes if Noah existed and his three children indeed existed, then his three children would be the progenitors of modern populations today. They will be the forefathers of modern populations today. So, we're trying to delineate what people groups would fit with each son. Haplogroups point to a common ancestor, and the MSY, or male-specific Y, sequential accumulation of mutational events, is the only source of interpopulation genetic diversity. This process creates monophyletic entities known as haplogroups, which show a strong geographic differentiation due to molecular divergence during the dispersal of mankind over the continent. Meaning, while men were dispersing, they began to develop mutations on their Y chromosome, and that's how we're able to trace different people groups and delineate different people groups. It's through this Y chromosome. Why do we use ancient DNA? This is Forensic DNA Analysis by Elena Pilley, page number 40. The calibration with ancient remains relies on less assumptions and uses as temporal reference points the radiocarbon dates of the ancient remains, which are highly precise and reliable. Some issues linked to this method are due to the degradation and contamination of ancient DNA, which can be addressed thanks to the technological improvements of the next generation sequencing techniques. So basically, it's just saying that we have found ancient remains, and ancient remains are good proxies to tell you what people were living in different localities. We're going to be dealing with Europe today, right? So we know who were the ancient Europeans because we have dug up the ancient remains, ancient skeletal remains, ancient peoples, and tested their DNA and determine what their Y chromosome DNA markers were. So, a map of ancient peoples, according to Josephus, Book 1, Chapter 6, it says how every nation was denominated from their first inhabitants. So, it's easy to determine who are the sons of Japheth. Basically, you just need to find out who were their first inhabitants were and who were those people that were there. So it says, now they were the children of Noah, the grandchildren of Noah, in honor of whom names were imposed on the nations by those that first seized upon them. Japheth, the sons of Noah, had 7 sons. They inhabited Sodom, beginning of the mountains of Taurus and Amanus. They proceeded along Asia as far as the river Tanis, and along Europe to Cadiz, and settled themselves on the lands which they light upon, which none had inhabited before. So Japheth's children, as they dispersed, they grew in number and they started to travel. They would go through what we call Anatolia and go into what we call Europe. And according to the account, they settled into lands which none inhabited before. Why does it talk like this? Because after Noah's flood, Noah's bottlenecking event, there was a population reduction that only were, Noah's family, according to the biblical tradition and narrative, only Noah's family survived. So after everybody was wiped out, they began to grow in number, and as they began to grow in number, they dispersed. And it is said, according to tradition, that the Japhethites will be the first ones to go to Europe. So here's CF is who we believe that the Japhethites are, haplogroup CF. And you see C, first Homo sapiens sapiens to go into Europe, to go into Australia, to go into, deep into East Asia, and so on and so forth, right? So if we're going off of what Josephus says, these would be your Japhethites. And yes, that includes your Australians, because again, we're not using physical appearance. You look at Australians and say, oh, they look, African or Negroid or whatnot. But no, they're the descendants of Japheth. So the ones that have C and the K haplogroups. So here's a breakdown of CF. CF is ancestral to haplogroup C and haplogroup F. And the thing about haplogroup F represents 90% of male lineages outside of Africa, which I think is very apropos to the scriptures where it says Japheth should be enlarged. Japheth represents the largest group on the planet Earth. This includes Europeans, Central Asians, East Asians, West Asians, Negritos, Filipinos, Japanese, Chinese. We can go on and on and on. Native Americans. They have the greatest representation on the planet Earth. And as you can see, G, H, I, and J, these will all be Japhetic groups. Europeoids, Japhites, or Japheth. This is from Clyosov genealogy, and he deems haplogroups F through R, which includes T, as Europeoids. And again, according to Josephus, the first people to go to Europe will indeed be designated as Europeans. And again, the people that have the CF markers or downstream markers of CF on their Y chromosome fit that description. A single founding population of Europe. The source is the genetic history of Ice Age Europe by Fu et al., and it was published June 9th, 2016 in the National Library of Medicine. It says, whereas there is no evidence of the earliest modern humans in Europe contributing to the genetic composition of present-day Europeans, all individuals between 37,000 and 14,000 years ago descended from a single founder population, which forms part of the ancestry of present-day Europeans. And approximately 35,000-year-old individual from Northwest Europe represents an early branch of this founder population, which was then displaced across a broad region. Before reappearing in Southwest Europe at the height of the last ice age, approximately 19,000 years ago. The following source is from the Supplementary Information Genetic History of Ice Age, Europe. It says here we assembled ancient DNA on a total of 51 ancient samples. Remember what we read earlier. Ancient samples are great proxies to determine ancient populations. It says here, to prepare these data, we combine previously published data from 14 samples and it lists each sample. With our new capture data of 38 samples, one sample overlap between two collections. So it has all of the upper Paleolithic, middle upper Paleolithic, and late upper Paleolithic, early Neolithic samples. So we're going from like 33,000 to 7,000 before present. And here are the haplogroups they found. Haplogroup F, a bunch of haplogroup I markers. Now this is all early Europe. You see an IJK. Haplogroup I, a bunch of haplogroup C markers. Haplogroup C markers continue. These are all the children of Japheth. These will be the first Homo sapiens sapiens, or modern humans, to inhabit Europe, making them great proxies for the sons of Japheth. HIJK, yes, that would include many of the JP58 members. They are related to HIJK and IJK, and they are the brothers to I. So they themselves will also be Japhites as well. Again, these are all early Europeans. The Villabona cluster samples, a lot of R. This is actually where you get the Chadic people. The Chadic people will come from Villabona, Italy, right? They are not Hamites. They're not Shemites. They would be Japhites because originally their ancestors come from Italy. They just migrated into Western Central Africa later, but their ancestors definitely come from Italy. So more haplogroup R in Villabruna was discovered. Haplogroup I, IJK, remember that's the brother of haplogroup J, which is famous because of the Cohen model haplotype is a downstream marker of JP58. But if we look at delineating delineating mankind based off the Noahic concept, Noah being the ancestor of us all, then you have to say, okay, the first people to go into Europe will be related to the JP58 markers, therefore deeming them as Japhites. You can see more European ancient samples found, CF, F, and some I markers. The phylogeny of IJK. This is from the Language of the Greater Himalayan Region, edited by George L. von Drijn, page number 156. The Y chromosomal clade IJK split into the paternal lineage IJ, which headed westward, and the lineage K, which remained in South and Southeast Asia. So a lot of your Negritos, this is why you can't use physical appearance to determine who people go back to. Remember, everybody was brown skinned at one point. It's not until recently we start developing what you call pale skin types, pale phenotypes. You know, early on at the onset of human dispersals, majority of the population would have been a gradation of brown, right? So the Negritos would be Japhites as well. Many of them have the K and C markers. It says which remain in South and Southeast Asia. The lineage IJ, so the Negritos are closely related to IJ, which are Anatolian, Near Eastern, and European lineages. Split into Y chromosome subclades I and J. The subclade I was born in Europe, meaning carried in Europe or raised in Europe, where it has survived as an early paternal lineage of the continent. Remember what Josephus stated. The first people to inhabit Europe, Tacitus, which is Spain, would indeed be the sons of Japheth, which means I would be Japhetic, making J Japhetic because I and J share common male ancestry. Making K Japhetic, which would be Negrito peoples in early Romania, right? And IJK would ultimately go back to haplogroup FM89. All of them have the M89 SNP on their Y chromosome. These will be your Japhites. It says the subclade I was born into Europe, where it has survived as an early paternal lineage of the continent, particularly in Scandinavian regions around the Straits of Skagerrak and Kattegat, in the Denmark Alpine region, on Sardinia, in the Netherlands and northern Germany, and in lower frequencies throughout the country. Haplogroup J. The paternal lineage J remained predominantly in the Near East, Asia Minor, and the Caucasus, whence it later spread both eastward and westward. The paternal lineage J is associated with an admixture event which unfolded during the mid-Holocene, involving the early adopters of agriculture in the Near East. The dissemination of the subsistence strategy assumed the form of a cultural diffusion into Europe, where agriculture was adopted and practiced mainly by local people bearing the other paternal lineages, E and I, already present in Europe since the Middle Stone or the Mesolithic. So haplogroup J, mainly Near Eastern around the Caucasus region, is what we're saying it arose, and it's a brother clade to I, and it's related to K and Negrito. These are all Japhetic lineages. Here's the OIC man, or OIC1 man. This man was, I believe, was a haplogroup K marker. And here's a reconstruction of what he looked like. His body was found in Romania, in Egypt. In Europe, in Eastern Europe. And this is how he would look. So again, you can't determine ancestry solely on how people look or a gradation of skin color, because you don't necessarily look like your ancestors. Many of the people of modern Europe have darker ancestors. The deeper you go in time, the more brown populations become. The Oasi man, the 2002 discovery of a robust modern human mandible in southwestern Romania, provides evidence of the early modern humans in the lower Danubian corridor. Directly accelerated mass spectrometry radiocarbon dated to 34 to 36,000 years before present. The Oasi-1 mandible is the oldest definite early modern human specimen in Europe. So the oldest human remain that we find, modern human remain that we find in Europe, belongs to the Oasi man, which belongs to a K marker, which descends from FM89, which again, if we're looking at the tradition Josephus has given us, this will represent Japhites, making all of FM89 Japhetic. Cro-Magnons, the first anatomically modern humans in Europe were once named after the Cro-Magnon rock shelter near the village of Les Izes in southwestern France. And leading geneticists note that their skin would have been black/dark, perhaps contradicting perceived popular images of the first Europeans. So many of the Europeans today descend from darker peoples. They would have been brown. like the reconstruction you see on the right. Source: Ancient Lives, an Introduction to Archaeology and Prehistory by Brian M. Fagan, page number 400. And the source of the image to the right is a reconstruction by Audrey Alphonse Kenneth in their Arnhem studio. Cheddar Man. Many of you guys know about Cheddar Man. He would be haplogroup I. Many of the people today in Europe with haplogroup I do not look like their ancestor. Maybe some of them carry the trait, the blue eye trait that Cheddar Man was known for. But many of them have developed pale skin over time. Remember, we're talking thousands and thousands of years ago. Cheddar Man lived about 8,000 years ago. And he would have been a dark hunter-gatherer living in Western Europe. All right? These will be your early Japhethites. Cheddar Man's population. Source is Ethno-Linguistic Prehistory, the Peopling of the World, from the Perspective of Language, Genes, and Material Culture by George von Drijn, page number 24. Ancient DNA has shown us that populations have changed all across Europe, in some regions more drastically than others. On the continent, farmers emanating from Asia Minor interbred with indigenous hunter-foragers at the time of the westwardly expanding Neolithic horizon, which reached the Iberian Peninsula last. By contrast, the British genome today, as compared with ancient DNA on the British Isles, show no sign of introgression from resident hunter-foragers. Instead, the findings indicate the replacement of the native insular population by the agriculturalist newcomers. The Mesolithic inhabitants of the British Isles were quite dark-skinned, and many of them, like Cheddar Man from Gold's Cave in Somerset, were blue-eyed. So the early population of the places like Britain would have been dark-skinned and blue-eyed. Cro-Magnons, the first Europeans. Same source, same page. The Mesolithic hunters who lived on the Iberian Peninsula at Labrana 7,000 years ago, and a hunter Konstantin 14 who lived in European Russia between 38,000 to 36,000 years ago, shared the paternal haplogroup C, associated with the Upper Paleolithic colonization of Europe by Cro-Magnon people. And again, C comes from CF. These will be all Japhetic people. The first people to be in Europe would be Japhites. Dark-skinned Japhites. Page 22 of the same source states, Europe was subject to successive population migrations after the warming phase, which began 15,000 years ago. Swarthy, dark-haired, blue-eyed hunter-gatherers of the European Mesolithic were gradually replaced by fair-skinned agriculturalists and pastoralists with the paleontologically recovered DNA exhibiting an unsettling genetic discontinuity in population prehistory. Now, what haplogroups came in and performed population replacement? These farmers basically had G markers. These would be early European farmers. They would have had G2A, which came in, introduced farming. You had some J markers. You would have some other Near Eastern markers coming in. And then later, you would have the Yamnaya. The Yamnaya event would bring a lot of R1B markers. These are all just other Japhites coming in during this period. The first Swedes. So this is from a film from the Swedish government that they produced, showing that the early inhabitants, their ancestors, would have been dark-skinned and blue-eyed. Right. The Ancient Brown World. This is the source from How a Genetic Mutation Led to the White Race. Nadra Karim Niddle. And the website is ThoughtCo. It was published July 4th, 2020. It says, imagine a world where everyone had brown skin. Tens of thousands of years ago, that was the case, says scientists at Pennsylvania State University. So how did white people get here? The answer lies in that tricky component of evolution known as genetic mutations. White skin's origin. A skin-white mutation appeared randomly in a sole individual, according to a 2005 Penn study. Same paper. And again, just to recapitulate, Josephus and his Antiquities of the Jews, chapter 6, it tells you how the Japhites will be the first ones to go along Europe unto Cadiz. And all of the groups that fit that description have some downstream marker of CF. This is why we designate CF as being the paternal marker of Japheth. Europeoid DNA 25,000 years ago. Languages of Greater Himalayan region, edited by George L. von Drijn, page number 22. At a greater time depth, new research on ancient DNA tells of even greater discontinuities in the population history of Switzerland. Wangler reported that Y chromosomal haplogroup G2A was found at Oberbip, dating from circa 3300 BC, whereas Y chromosomal haplogroup I predominated at the collective grave at Spreitenbach, dating from the 25th century BC, and Y chromosomal haplogroup R made its debut at later sites such as Siegen D Cemetery site, dating from the 21st century BC. All of these groups are downstream markers or descendants of the CF group. These will all be Japhites. What is Japheth's DNA? Right? Because the Bible tells you, they tell you that they will be the people of the Isles. So your Cretians, they would be Japhites, right? What was the DNA of these Mediterranean island peoples? Japheth's DNA would be haplogroup G and J, or Javon's DNA. Javon is a son of Japheth. Same source, same page. It says similarly, on Crete, the Minoan and Mycenaean cultures were established by pioneers bearing the paternal lineage J into a rim where the paternal lineage G2 had previously been predominant. So G2 and J will represent Javon, or represent the Bible, according to the biblical tradition, the sons of Japheth, the sons of Javon. That would be your Minoans. All right. G2A was also in ancient Europe, as we covered earlier. They would be part of those early European forms. Fort Wangler et al. 2020, from the 7th to 4th millennium, that's 7,000 to 4,000 BC. The paternal lineage G2A was also prevalent in the Carpathian Basin, so they were there in Europe. Ancient Scythian genomes. This is from the genetic kinship and admixture of Iron Age Scytho-Siberians, Alaramari et al. It was published March 28, 2019. It says here 28 Scythian individuals from 5 archaeological sites in the Tuva Republic, which is in Russia, were analyzed using autosomal short tandem repeats, YSTR, YSNP typing, as well as whole mitochondrial genome sequencing. Here's some of these haplogroups here. R and Q descends from FM89. According to that study we just read, Mary 2019 studied the genetics of remains from the Albi Bell culture in around Tuva in Central Asia. Adjacent to Western Mongolia, and the Albi Bell culture is considered one of the Scythian cultures. The majority of the samples, 9 out of 17, were found to be carriers of haplogroup R1A. Now, R ultimately descends from FM89, which descends from CF. Again, we're just recapitulating at this point. These will all be Japhites. It says, including 2 carriers of haplogroup R1A1, A1B2, Z93. East Asian admixture was also detected at 6 haplogroups Q-L54, including 5 in the Sagli culture, and in one haplogroup N-M231 were excavated. The haplogroups of the remaining one sample was uncertain, probably from group R. Samples of the Japhites from Jarvie 2019. The studied genetics of various peoples belonging to the Scythian cultures, such as the Sumerians, Scythians, Samaritans, and Saka. Mostly of the remnants in all groups were found to carry various subclades of haplogroups R1A, with a few haplogroup Q samples also found. Only 2 Y-DNA samples out of 160 identified. The samples are more closely related to modern-day Europeans than any modern native to Central Asia or Siberia. Oldest J1P58 marker. You know, this is the marker that's famous because of the model Cohen model haplotype. Now, this is from the origin diffusion of Y chromosome haplogroup J1M267 by Sai Hak Yun et al. Was published on Nature March 23rd, 2021. So it says haplogroup J1M267 probably evolved in the region encompassing northeastern Syria, southeastern Turkey, and northwestern Iran 9 to 24,000 years ago. The oldest human out of some ancient DNA reported so far belonging to this haplogroup originates from an individual who lived approximately 13.3 thousand years ago in the Caucasus during the late Upper Paleolithic. So again, that would all be Japhetic territory when we're looking through a biblical lens. That's where we see these markers, mainly, living at. You see the Scythians, we dealt with the Scythians is up north. We dealt with Europe, we dealt with Greece, we dealt with the Cretians, and we showed the early remnants all being descendants of CF, FM89. All right, let's continue. So a summation of the matter, the Proto-Europeans are the Japhites per Josephus. Meaning all of these haplogroups were downstream markers of CF. We saw I, we saw G, we saw R, we saw the Villabruna, we went over the Scythians. We went over a lot of specimens today, and they were all descendants of CF. It says we have the Y DNA, or male-specific Y, of Proto-Europeans, and they are all CF lineages. These specimens designate that the Proto-Europeans would have been dark-skinned individuals. So these lighter-skinned individuals you see today in Europe, they literally descend from darker people in the past. Just like majority of the planet descends from darker-skinned people in the past. That's why you can't solely rely on phenotype to determine someone's ancestry. It says here, these specimens designate that the Proto-Europeans would have been dark-skinned individuals. If the Bible account of the repopulating of the earth through the three sons of Noah is true, then we should expect three major nodes that branch out to all extant populations. And what this is saying is, yes, at the onset of Noah and his three sons, they would all share a common ancestor, but as they grow and as they disperse through the earth, they would develop their own mutations and their own distinct branches of the tree. And those three nodes being the major parahaplogroups A and B for Ham, haplogroup DE for Shem, and CF for Japheth. And that wraps it up. So who are the sons of Japheth? Will be Proto-Europeans, and these Proto-Europeans are definitely descendants of CF. With that, I say shalom. We out. We got one more video to do, and that will be on who are the sons of Shem. We've covered Japheth, we covered Ham, and we even covered Noah. So now let's cover Shem and wrap this up in a nice bow.
Peace all on the track.